Hola de nou. Reprenem aquesta matinal amb aquestes dues sessions que ens queden per tancar el Congrés. Ho farem amb una sessió que es titula Mobilitat intel·ligent, mobilitat sostenible. Demano al moderador i als ponents que vagin entrant mentre els presento. El senyor Carles Casas és director de Planificació Estratègica i Prospectiva de Ferrocarrils de la Generalitat de Catalunya. Benvingut, senyor Casas, serà el moderador. I com a ponents, la senyora Daria Kuzmina, Manager of Knowledge and Innovation, UATP. Welcome. Entrarà via streaming, amb qui connectarem d'aquí uns breus moments, la senyora Vivian Chiosi, Director of Innovation a Intrasoft International. Senyor Casas, abans deixi'm excusar el senyor Pedro Porta, que havia de ser aquí també amb nosaltres, de Huawei, que per un imprevist d'últim moment ens ha demanat excuses i no podrà assistir. Ara sí, senyor Casas, quan vulgui.
Moltes gràcies, Eva. Bon dia. Bon dia a tots. Buenos días. Good morning. This is going to be an international session, so we'll move to English in order to have this fluent conversation with our two distinguished guests this morning here. The topic we're going to cover is very large. I mean, title Smart Mobility or Intelligent Mobility, Sustainable Mobility. We could really talk about a lot of things here. So what we present today is two speeches or two presentations that go to the concept more than to a particular issue, and then practical examples, good practices to move towards this direction that, as we've seen during the Congress and the previous sessions, it's a commonplace. Everyone acknowledges that due to the growth of population in urban cities, on urban areas and cities, due to the pressure of global challenges like global warmth, but also health issues, also the change of habits and the aim and the need for a more livable environment for our population, mobility must change and the patterns must change. And we cannot just rely on technology or time to solve the situation. We need to take action, and we need to take action now, because this kind of decisions and actions taken on the field of planning, the decisions taken today, they last for years. In the previous session this morning, we were hearing how some cities still are applying patterns that were solutions in other parts of the world 40 years ago. And the question aroused was that a mistake, or was that a stage that was supposed to be in order to achieve in 40 years a more sustainable model? I think we should be ambitious, and that's why international organizations like UITP that we have today are meant to exist, to interchange experiences, to learn from each other, so that cities that are still growing do not commit the same mistakes that other cities, more older cities like in old Europe, we are trying to reverse nowadays. So I won't speak more, because as I'm the moderator, I will try to encourage afterwards with some not very tricky questions our speakers. Let me introduce Daria Kuzmina, who comes from the UITP. Most of you probably already know UITP. It's the World Reference Organization for Public Transport. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I work for UITP since 2017, and I started with the research and innovation projects, mainly in the transport railway sector. Now I also deal with the members, with the Light Rail Committee, and a very good thing to see what is the needs from the research side and also from the urban rail operator side. And I'm really happy to be here today, because for me it's actually the first business trip and at the Congress, and I'm happy that it happens in Barcelona, in Sitges. I've never been here. So I'm really happy to see new people and also communicate with you all. And today I will talk about the public transport sustainable contribution, and I will provide some challenges and use cases. And I will start from this, that at the end of 2020, the European Commission published the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy. And the goals are very ambitious, and in order to achieve them, we at UATP think that it's important to recognize and strengthen the public transport as it's the backbone of sustainable urban mobility, and this sentence exactly was also said at the previous session. In order to it, we also need to have the public transport innovative and smart, but of course we all face challenges, and just briefly I will go through them. So of course there are some environmental that we all know about, like the climate change, air pollution and congestion. There is also some demographic, like the social division, and now at this time, after the pandemic, and well, pandemic is not over yet, it's more visible, demographic change, more elderly population. Mobility in rural areas, it's still a problem that is not solved. And from the operational side, the COVID-19 pandemic is still ongoing, and for many operators, the loss of the ridership and fares was like up to 90%, and as a consequence, there is unsecure financing of public transport. You may notice digitalization and automation that I also mentioned. You would ask why, but it can be as an opportunity, but also a challenge if it's not properly explored, and shortage of staff. So we speak about the increase of demand for public transport, and if we don't have the good qualified personnel, of course we can't satisfy the needs of passengers, and it will slow down the modal shift. And how to deal with it? And the answer is easy and not easy at the same time. It's to make public transport the preferred choice of citizens at their daily mobility. And the vision of UITP regarding the future of public transport, that it should be available, accessible, high qualitative, sustainable and resource efficient, resilient, it should be a good employer, and innovative and integrated. And today we talk about smart mobility as sustainable mobility, so I will focus my presentation exactly on this part. And the first point is to make this coordination between the traditional mass public transit and complementary sustainable mobility options like rider sharing and carpooling. It means that it's about encouraging the carpooling to be complementary to the public transport. And as an example, I provided here the project that is called Ride to Rail, that was financed by Shift Rail Joint Undertaking, and which UITP coordinates. And it's exactly to solve this issue, to test the solutions and to see how the people can be encouraged to use the carpooling and rider sharing as the complementary public transport, and also to motivate people to use the public transport in the rural areas and low density areas. There are 4 pilots in this project with the different objectives to achieve. The next point is effective multimodal and cross-border cooperation. So we talk about mass, and there are some trials already, or even into operation in some limited areas. Here we should talk more about the global mass at the level of EU, and it's something that's really hard to achieve. There are some attempts also. I was involved in another project in Shift to Mass that was over, and IP4 Mass that is a continuation of it, also funded by Shift to Rail. And the idea is to test different IT solutions as all in one solution, like the travel companion that can help the passengers to move not only within the location where they live, but also for the cross-border trips. Yeah, it's not really easy, especially if we talk about the interoperability of data and different solutions. There are actually 6 demo sites. In this project, I showed only 2, just there were not so much space in the slide, to be honest. And one of them is in Barcelona, if I'm not mistaken. There are 4 companies who participate in it, in testing the solutions. And another demo site, it's Liberica in Czech Republic, so it's more about cross-border trips because this place is at the border of the 3 countries. Another point, data. Of course, we can have the innovative solutions from the technological point of view, but it's very important to know how we can use the data and whether we have enough data to make it into life. And so the cooperation based on the mutual and fair data exchange between all actors involved is very important. And here we talk about the national access points as the main source for data that should be interoperable to have the same approach, so-called EU minimum data that would be applicable to all countries in the European Union. And here there is a project Data for PT that deal with it, and 9 countries are involved in it. And there are some also pilot programs in it. It's a program support action that is under safe transport, so to improve the connectivity between the different countries. And here, of course, if we talk about data, I also can mention that it also influenced the smooth digital customer information, ticketing services, complaining, incident handling, so all services that end users receive. The next point is improving operations based on artificial intelligence and new tools. Here we talk about the automated vehicles, and there is a really huge, large demonstration scale project that aims to deploy shared, connected, and electrified automated vehicles to advance the sustainable mobility. And here we talk not only about the passenger transport, but also about cargo and also the mixed types of it. And there are some pilots in 20 cities to deploy more than 70 vehicles with the dedicated lanes and the mixed traffic, with the existing infrastructure involving like 5G, Internet of Things, and other technologies. And the last but not least, good if we have data, we have technologies, but we also need to pay attention to the regulation side. And in this case, we should assure that regulations are agile and they can change together with the new mobility services that we have. And here there was also coordinated by UITP project that is called GECO. It's already over, but it produced very nice recommendations towards new regulatory and governance approaches, business models for mobility services, cooperation of services among public and private parties, and also recommendations on data and sustainability. And maybe I will put more attention on the sustainability part because we talk, it's our topic of the discussion here today. Regarding the new standardized procedures and new form of contracts, it's really important to consider the environmental sustainability for each new mode of transport in order to maximize benefits from it. And also different positive impacts, strategies, monitoring, and measures why the new mobility services did not achieve their targets also should be clearly described in these contracts. And just to conclude, so public transport is the most climate-friendly way of traveling. We all know it, but we also need to show it to the passengers. And Green Deal and goals of the neutral, carbon-neutral cities is not impossible to achieve if we don't invest in the new mobility solutions that would be beneficial for travelers and end users, and who would that would foster the model shift. And of course, I would not have even 1 hour of this session to say about all what I wanted to say. So that is why I provided some links in case you are interested in to go to know deeper about the projects and also about our contribution to the sustainable and urban mobility strategy. Yeah, thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Daria. I think that, as I anticipated at the beginning, you arose several topics that would require an entire session just to tackle each one of them. Also, I think that you transmitted also the challenges that we are facing and how we are trying to solve it from a cooperative approach, which is why also all these projects are launched and how we learn from each other, which is not the only approach. We see also how in the world there are other actors or agents trying to implement solutions in a more competitive approach, working alone and trying then to impose solutions. So we'll see how it evolves in the end, and we'll have time to discuss afterwards. Now we move to our other speaker, Ms. Vivian Kiowski. I think she's online. Hello, Vivian.
Yes, I am.
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you very well. Thank you. Let me tell you, I'm extremely jealous that I'm not there today. I'm an excessive traveler. For the ones that know me and actually watch this particular session, COVID put us a bit down, but it's giving me a very good forefront to discuss about shared mobility, which is the topic I will focus, and more especially mass. Let's say a few words on where I come from. I originally come from Greece. I don't represent Greece today, but a company of 13 countries. This is Intrasoft International. We have been established in 1996. Head offices are in Luxembourg. We're more than 2,200 high-skilled professionals, 50 nationalities, with operation in 500 organizations and in 70 countries worldwide. Hearing also our friend from UITP, we have a very similar background on the project side. We're running more than 60 projects at the moment as we speak now. I'm the head of the Transport Lab for Research. I'm also a senior business innovation manager, so having a dual role, I'm looking at the forefront of innovation. What I heard was really interesting. There is a need to integrate various forms of transport services. Before COVID, I was an excessive traveler, as I mentioned, a mobile user. I suffered a lot, especially when I was changing countries. This is how we started, myself and another team involved with the Mass Alliance and similar contributing bodies talking about mass. And why mass? Because mass, according to the way we were perceiving it, due to the research and business curiosity, we considered that there's a very interesting framework that could offer an added value, especially because it would require simplicity. All we wanted as travelers was a single application to provide easy access to mobility, and if possible, a single payment. So I believe that you have been in the position to have to go to a meeting, to cross countries, and to be lost in translation, as we say, between several providers. So for the users, this was the initial belief, MaaS should be the best value proposition. Of course, we could even research of potential new business models behind it. I have to admit that COVID hasn't stopped really the idea of MaaS. We've tested MaaS on several occasions, and as Carlos mentioned, I will bring today some outputs from a particular project that has been funded by the European Commission, and it was a real life project, one of the first ones that have been awarded, with a long list of participants. We were coordinating it. It was the Transport for Greater Manchester on board, MaaS Global, Inlecom, Ximedes, BKK, FFV, Transport Departments of UK, UCL. It was quite interesting to see that we wanted to see the approach of the third mobility and MaaS from a different perspective. So we wanted to address first the challenges of a real life situation, a real life pilot, under different pillars. We wanted to see what's happening on the business, on the end users, on the technology and the policy. The geographical area of focus was that of Greater Manchester, Greater Luxembourg, and Budapest. And why is that? Because it had different opportunities with different scenario. Manchester has a lot of urban and intercity trips. TFGM was the MaaS operator for this particular trial. Greater Luxembourg, due to its location and the inflows of users, we could see the cross-border and urban trips. SLA was the MaaS operator there. And in Budapest is a very important triangle for tourism and work. So we could see the urban and cross-border trips as well. We had two different operators. We started with MaaS Global on the initiation of the project, and then they were replaced by toll service. So they were actual providers interested to implement MaaS. So what we have done, we designed, and this was the main objective, prototype business models. We tried to bring together and work with different public and private mobility service providers and explored at the same time needs and preferences to design and develop an open platform. So the most important element and key achievements that we received was that we've done serious focus groups, so we know exactly what is happening in the location to derive the user requirements, market research. We delivered the platform and app, and we have done appropriate testing. So it's one of the first projects that had the possibility to discuss with providers from different stakeholder groups. And we were in the position also to suggest policy recommendations through different papers, books, and we're still contributing on that. Let me tell you mainly on the challenges and lessons learned, because this is very interesting for the ones that they have an interest on being part of an alliance for MaaS or wanting to deliver a service. So on the business challenges that we have seen in the lessons learned, we know that the establishing communication takes time, especially with the MSPs. I have to admit that the agreements with them were very challenging. There is a general reluctance to devote resources with low return, and main concern was the financial side and the profit. So what they required was a need for clear and specific business models and clear incentives. What's it for me? So many times we worked on data sharing agreements between MOs and MSPs, and this proved to be critical. And there was a value of co-creation among the MSPs who could offer different services to create synergies. Also, there is an importance of clear goals to be stated and an alignment with policy. People are a bit fearful because the framework is new. So this is why we also were in the position to suggest some topics for policy changes. Now, important element also for the Congress, data and technology. There were several operators that do not have APIs needed to integrate to a platform. And as far as I know, there are several examples that have been delivered now in Europe doing tests. And why is that? MSPs are pretty reluctant to share access to APIs, even if these are available. Also, another issue is the payment systems. MSPs wanted to be in control of this, despite the technology that exists. A huge problem also appeared to be the paper ticketing in some modes of transport. Pilot apps. Payment was not an option for all modes, and there is still limited integration of services into the app. That happens though because there are different legislative and technology maturities, let's say, in the different countries. Also, the ones that are interested in mass, we would say that they have to engage early with technology. This is the basis for the rest of the solution. And also, it requires flexibility with regards to implementation for different operators and services. The issue of interoperability has been at the forefront. So there is a general difficulty to get on board if you're back on technology and follow the same systems. Very important on the end users. I'm an end user as well. So the benefits of mass are difficult to be processed by the end users before they use the service themselves. Recruitment on the pilots proved to be difficult because it was a new solution. Information and explanation regarding what mass is and the potential benefits was a requirement. There were too many mobility apps as well. So people were a bit confused. So they find it as a promising concept, but only once it is explained properly. So if you do that, then the majority of the end users, we've seen from surveys and interviews, like the idea. There is also a difficulty in competing with pricing from existing mobility services. So users has expressed on the surveys initial fears of locked into subscription services. Probably you've seen yourselves also experiencing the same when questioned to do so. But once they used the Mass app and had the experience personally, they were more positive, especially the young professionals who do not own a car. For them, Mass was most popular user group to target. Now, on the policy side, which is a very important element for a new framework, we looked on the passenger rights and liability, what is happening especially with cross-border trips. There are a lot of things to be done and be considered there. There is a lack of data availability, as I mentioned, and interoperability of data is an issue. Also, the possibility to resell tickets in several occasions is banned by legislation. So it requires a clear regulation over the new modes to be introduced when you do such a cooperation. Public authorities also should act from what we got as feedback as the main bodies overseeing a transition to a mass framework. And there is a need for the ones that they want to work on this particular solution to help organizations to work together to deliver mass and also to support an open engagement. These were the main issues. I will give a couple of takeaways that if a mass service business model does not work in one area, this does not necessarily mean that it will not work in another. So we have seen a different level of maturity between countries and locations. I'm saying locations because each location has also its specificities. And we need to analyze really well the geographical and economical area we target when we want to introduce mass. Of course, there is not one mass solution which is perfect for all. And mass generally is a general concept still that can be adapted, of course, to the needs of any local or national and international content. That was the main, let's say, outputs I would like to bring to your attention as feedback from the surveys, interviews, and actual pilots that run. So, Carlos.
Thank you very much for your wide explanation. You said that there were two takeaways or two final comments, but I took plenty of notes during your speech, so there are many, many insights that I will keep myself. Just to highlight the simplicity that you mentioned at the beginning, or the need to engage early with technology. So we've seen too, from our speakers, the wideness of the topic, and we've seen several layers that have to be dealt with in order to achieve success. You mentioned the different levels of maturity, and I think that the title of the session was devoted to sustainability and intelligent mobility. With sustainability, I think we already reached the level that we know that when we speak about sustainability, it's not just environment. There are also economical issues and social issues involved in the concept of sustainability. Probably we should do the same process with intelligent or smart concept. It's not just technology. We have this tendency to see when a session or a project is linked to smart mobility, to think just right away with technology, but we should also have other layers, as you mentioned. The system development, in the end, we are implementing a transport system in a reality. We have the existing layouts and infrastructures. We have the existing operators, all the agreements and regulations that are there in place with several actors having their small business models and their realities. And then we have the users. They need also to understand why the changes are implemented and which would be their benefits. So I also liked how you spoke about the business model at several moments during your speech. And in this concept of intelligent mobility systems, let's say, infrastructure also plays a key role. And with the pandemic, we've seen this increase on flexibility and even teleworking. And I know that that's, even if you didn't talk about it today, but there's a thought, or maybe it's a good moment to reflect, if we should keep building infrastructures designed only for rush hour, or we could be able to develop systems that change behavior or to enhance behavioral changes so that we can have a better use, optimize the use of the existing systems and not only thinking about growing their capacity. I don't know, which is your view on that sense? Is there a bias? We always think that, okay, the future is to keep enlarging, or there's a gap for a real change in behavior and have a more optimal use of the infrastructure?
I can, yeah, I can say.
Whichever you want to answer. I don't know if there's a delay. Vivian?
It's okay. Let me just note that change is not easy to come. So what we have seen also in mass, people have a reluctancy for new things. When they get introduced, though, and everything is very well explained to them, then they are more easy to get into this change level. Also, what we have seen, which I haven't included in the presentation, is that what we are perceiving, especially the ones that we give services to the audience, that we have a never-ending, demanding audience. The more you give, the more they take. The game, though, of this shift is, are we ready for that? Who are the stakeholders required? What are the real obstacles? And behind that, the most important element for something to go one step further is that somebody in the value chain should have a direct interest on it. It may be the city because it has a city plan and they want to change, let's say, the standard of living of their citizens. It may be the providers because they want to give more traveling user-friendly solutions. This is more for the transport experts to investigate further, to be in the position to be at the forefront for this digital transformation, for this change that you mentioned. So I hope I answered your question, or I missed something that you want me to clarify further.
Well, in fact, what you
I
mentioned,
understood it as what is required to get into the change level. This is how I translated it.
yeah. In fact, that I also noted that from your speech that change is difficult and how there are always stoppers or retarders in every change, even if I said at the beginning that we have here like a general consensus on the evolution of mobility, but then when we try to implement solutions on practical terms, well, this consensus on the theoretical level is not always perceived in the same way by the direct affected actors. So that was part of the question. I was more referring to probably the capacity of the existing infrastructure, also if technology could help on that. But in that sense, let me go.
That's not the same in every place. That's not the same in every place. On the changeability and the adoption, what we have seen in mass, but also in other new ideas, people feel more secure to have the public authorities on board. Now, on the technology, as I mentioned, is very important for somebody to get into the next level, to start, let's say, their digital transformation, if it is a city, to start catching up. But we haven't seen the same level of maturity between cities. And this was on the major takeaways. What works for one may not work for another one.
Yeah, I know.
But technology is not the barrier. The data and the data availability is a greatest barrier than the technology, because you can easily get into the next step, adopt, pay, find a way out to get into this level of technology maturity. How we treat data, how we share data, legislation behind the data sharing is something we have been discussing, as far as I remember, all the last years, and we haven't reached at the ultimate, let's say, solution to it yet.
Yeah, okay.
And this is a major topic we also discussed at the Big Data Value Association. So
Okay, let me move
this is an ongoing.
to Daria. Also, do you, from the UITP, the recommendations that UITP is providing on this transition, are you aligned with what Vivian was commenting?
Thank you for the question. So actually, when Vivian was telling about the outcomes of her project, actually, I have almost the same results. So I would confirm on every word she said. We had, yes, the same issues to overcome. Regarding the, talking from the UITP side, I would say that the main concept which we try to promote is avoid, shift, and improve. Avoid the traffic as much as we can, shift to the public transport, and to improve concrete modes of transport. But again, by improving the public transport, it doesn't mean that people will start use it. We need other incentives trying to shift them to use it. And also you mentioned about the on-demand services and how we how the technologies can help improve the capacity of the public transport. And several ideas came to my mind. So the first one, I think if you was at the session yesterday, there was a presentation of Larry from UPC about COEP's project. So basically this project was about how the data can change the behavior of the passengers by providing them information on their during their trip, on which stations are occupied and which a better way to use in order to avoid it. And at the same time, in the UITP, we also noticed the interest in the occupancy monitoring system, but not from the position to know, just to know how many people we we have in our vehicles in concrete movement, but also to provide this information to the passengers. And we even did a survey, and survey showed that those companies who just collected this information for the internal use, they started to provide this information because the COVID pandemic forced them to do it in order to avoid the congestion in the vehicles. And it's exactly this information can be received through their travel companions, the ones that they use for mass, for the integrated systems. And also there was one example of STEEP, its operator in Brussels, what we can do with all these monitoring technologies after the COVID. And actually there were some examples that show the interest of the end users to these technologies. For example, in the evening time, quite late, they feel more safer in the vehicles where there are at least some people. So, and if you provide them information that would improve their security in public transport and safety, it's always a good thing, and it's always help to change their behavior in one or another way.
Yeah.
So I answered several questions.
Yeah, there are many additional questions. Also, I completely agree. Also, that the pilots and the tests that they can really help to accelerate the change, because until people are reluctant to change, we are reluctant to change. So having these pilots and being able to test the solutions. It's like, well, in competitive environment, companies know that the worst thing is for a customer to test the competition, because maybe then they discover that's better. And that's the same here for habit change. So new systems we should really be active in testing them and generating this momentum of positive views on the change. I have more questions, but maybe Eva, I don't know if there are some questions also from from the online viewers that are contributing or via Twitter or the messaging, the chat. I don't know. If not, I can. Do we have questions?
Yeah. We have got a question. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. The question is for everybody, so also for you, Carlos. The question is, who do you think should arbitrate or coordinate a mass operation in a given city to secure neutrality, innovation, and a complete fair offer? The city council, a private actor, public transport authorities? Who do you think? Carlos, if you want.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key questions and one of the things that are discussed here. And I don't know if there's a clear answer to that. For sure, and that I will give a personal view on that, not just, we should have some entity that assures neutrality in front of the system. That's a key issue. And also the other thing is that if public entities or neutral authorities do not do that, someone will do that with other interests behind, not just the interest of a more efficient and sustainable public transport or mobility system in a city. So in my view, it should be some kind of public or neutral-based entity. I don't know if the city itself or a transport authority or another kind of entity that should be in charge, at least of assuring it. Then in practical terms, they can do it themselves or through private companies. But that should be more my personal approach, or you have a wider view on that.
No, actually I agree with Carlos, and I would also add that it should be mass-like coordinated approach with different players on the market, private and public. Maybe with the core, at the core of it should be mass public transport operator, and of course it should be with the oversight of the public regulator, so in order to make it working.
Mm-hmm. Vivian?
Hi.
Hi.
Actually, we have seen that on the different actual tests. As I mentioned, in one of the occasions, TFGM was the mass operator, so we had the chance to see exactly what's happening when a central operator is involved. We've seen also the private type in Hungary. There is not a pros and cons. Definitely at some point of the equation, we have to involve the public administration. Why? Because they may need to be several issues to be tackled that have to do with legislation. For example, the reselling of tickets that I mentioned. We also ran a survey where we asked about the choice between the MSPs to be in the position to see, or the public authorities themselves as running the operation. I will have to admit that there was like not a clear distinction that the government wanted to control everything. We even registered possibilities of a consortium, but somebody, let's say, directing the coordination of how we ensure that the service of delivery is given, and they also control the splitting of the gain. Because, you know, the government is also very sensitive about that. So we have released, and they are to be released, papers at the moment from Us4EU about the input from the studies. We've seen three equations, three choices. The public, but with great difficulty to operate on all the steps. The private operator having more flexibility to operate, but they definitely want some kind of involvement of the public, and then a consortium where somebody is named the coordinator of this partnership. So, as I said, it depends on the location, on the flexibility. I recall on the Dutch inputs from the study, they were more relaxed to discuss on taking care of such, let's say, a solution. Other countries were more reserved because it was something new. So happy to share also papers and public documents that are available with the team of IMC, that you could have the chance to see how the respondents have reacted. And we have a list from Europe where we done interviews also with MSPs and public authorities, and there were, I think, more than 50 people that have responded on that. That they are actually on the decision-making process from us.
Also, probably here there are cultural and different approaches based on different parts of the world, on considerations about privacy and data and so on. That's also an element which is very difficult to unify everywhere. We see about the data from the mobile phones, how there are tons of very useful data to be more efficient and to plan, make more accurate planning for transport. But depending on the countries, depending on the cultures, this data can be used, can be provided or not. It should be, in some cases, there's like a 24-hour time limit to keep the data. In other countries, it's a wider scope, so it makes the data more useful, but there are more confidentiality or privacy issues linked to that. So it's as Vienna said, it's not a technological barrier. There are other barriers which are the fences that we are trying to overcome globally now, which are very difficult. In that sense, also an approach that I heard from Vienna also was that all this new environment of data, they saw it a little bit like infrastructure. So infrastructure or the land use, no one argued against a public management and some kind of regulation of it. So there should be also the same kind of approach. See, all data should be integrated as infrastructure, so all potential actors on the mobility system should have access to this data in a regulated way as they have access to the use of the streets or the use of the territory. So it was like implementing this approach that's already in our minds from infrastructure and from land use and land management into the digital and the data. Well, I thought it was a good, let's say, comparison to see how we can be neutral on regulating it.
You are talking about the approach, and I just have some quotes from all of you. And for example, Vivian said, all we want as a travelers is simplicity. Just one word, simplicity. Or Carlos, you said sustainability is not just environment. And Vivian said, one of the key points is the availability of data. And that sounds for me some kind of, this is a common sense. So maybe my question is, do we need to change altogether, the stakeholders and all of us, the approach of this sustainability to achieve the smart sustainability?
Can I reply first?
Yes, sure.
And I will only focus on the data. For this to happen, we have definitely to move in an open data landscape. This is the main, let's say, issue we have to resolve before being in the position to implement, and I'm thinking of the cross-border option trips first, because we need to work for a unified Europe. For that to happen, technology players, together with government, they have to interact. Business to government working groups have to be placed. Let's say, outmost motto should be that we have to move to a data market economy. And after these working groups start interacting, then it is easier to move to a structure where agreements and sharing becomes easy to understand, because agreements are necessary, especially for sharing mobility teams that they want to do business together, and in, let's say, possibilities like mass. So if that process is not going to work that way, it will delay everything in time.
Daria?
So this could be a policy suggestion we could express. A businessman to government working group in every country, move to an open data landscape.
Okay, I will also continue with the data, and we call it data reciprocity. So basically, if the company and operator or organizing authority would like to be in this ecosystem with the data, it agrees to give you the data, but in the answer, you should provide the access to your data. And only on the principle of this data reciprocity, we can achieve this so-called open data and enable shared mobility not only in specific locations, but on the EU-wide landscape.
Yeah, but just to add.
Yes, sure.
It makes common sense, but I would say not all the actors in the system are willing for an efficient system, particularly those who are moved by providing a service, but having a benefit at the end of the year. So what they want is to achieve greater income from their activity. So sharing some kind of data can affect their business. And that's where there is a barrier also. Yeah. And there was let's say Hong Kong has a tradition of having an integrated system, but there are two different companies competing, the tramways on surface and the metro underground. And tramways companies did not want the metro to know where did they have the demand, because they did not want the metro to answer to that and provide an alternative service that would take passengers from their system. So, okay, the principle here in the room we do agree, but then when we come down and we have our business or all these micro mobility or scooter sharing models, in some cases, part of the business model is based on efficient algorithms on locating where the demand is, how to positionate all the vehicles. Well, there's a lot of investment there. There's a lot of, so sharing to some extent detailed data could affect also this efficiency of the system. So, okay, here in theory we agree. And makes common sense, as you said, but then when you go to reality, you know...
It's not easy.
It's not as easy. It's like when you're in the beach selling ice creams, you don't care if people have to walk a lot as long as they buy your ice cream. So you don't want someone else to put another ice cream store next to you. So it's like the same, even if that would be better for everyone in the beach to have 2 ice cream selling positions. So
Okay.
it's
Okay.
not as problem.
I think we can finish.
Yeah, we can finish.
Yes, sure.
If I may,
Carlos.
just I wanted to thank our speakers for being here also. And I've seen from the speeches that technology is there, is not very well already advanced, but it won't solve anything by itself. That's clear. So, and I mentioned it at the beginning. When we talk about intelligent mobility, it's not about technology. Technology is a tool, but not the only one. We have lots of tools. We have also our transport vehicles and systems, from infrastructure and tunnels up to the scooters. They work better and better. They are more efficient, energy efficient. The infrastructure is more reliable and resilient, and so on, and more technified. And on the other side, we have the demand. The users, we spoke a lot about the users themselves, commuters daily, but also visitors, people traveling abroad, crossing, but also society, that even those who are not users of the transport system, they want it to be sustainable and contribute to a livable city. So these 2 sides. So where we should apply intelligence is in the middle. Elements like, Daria said, regulations, for example, who are always late and they are not really following technology or business models, planning. So for me, and that's my final wrap up, let's say, from the session, is that we should apply this intelligence to this gap between what we can do and what we are demanded to do. But the problem is the how and how we implement that into practice. That's where we should be intelligent.
Thank you so much for these headlines and for this wrapping. Thank you so much, all of you, to be here, to share your time, your knowledge. I think it has been a very interesting session. Thank you so much. An applause, please.